I wanted to come back to the Piedmontese Massacre sonnet to talk about form and meaning and pull in some of our discussion from today on Friday. The question I want to ask is, what does Milton want of the God whom he addresses in this sonnet? What's the rhetoric about? It begins, "Avenge, O Lord," and it directly addresses God, unlike the sacred music poem, which implies God and speaks about God. This one is right there, talking to God. What does he want out of God? Some of the possibilities that the beginning of the sonnet suggests are: he wants vengeance. Avenge, O Lord, thy slaughtered saints. Other possibilities, I guess, are remembrance, beginning of the fifth line, forget not. Uh, and more than remembrance, some kind of recording. In thy book, record their groans. He wants God's book of life to record their groans. Why? So vengeance, memory, archive. Why? To what end? What's going on here? What does he want out of God? I'm going to turn to form, as I did on Friday with meter, but this time in a different sense to get a handle on how I might answer that question. Form. This is an Italian sonnet. A Shakespearean sonnet is different in form. Milton was going back to the Italian sonnet, and as you'll see in your book, he wrote sonnets in Italian. In that case, the the octave is composed of two rhymes: bones, stones, groans, moans. That is four words all rhyming together. And the A words and the B words: cold, old, fold, and rolled. It's Try it in English. It's a hard thing to do. This constitutes then the octave, the first 8 lines of the uh, of the poem. This is supposed to draw the octave in here. The But not very well. Sorry about that. The sestet is the last 6 lines of the poem, of course, and those also rhyme. They, sway, way, a C rhyme and a D rhyme. So, grow, and woe. Um, so we would expect the sonnet to divide at the end of the octave, to finish up a thought and then to reconsider it. What happens in this sonnet? We get this strange transitional sentence. Just before, 2 beats before, uh, 1 IM before the end of the 8th line, we get a period, a strong period, mother with infant down the rocks, thud. New start, their moans, and this really makes no sense, their moans by itself. So it has to carry over. It thrusts us over from octave to sestet, from 8th line to 9th. Their moans, the vales redoubled to the hills. It not only throws us over, but it throws us over in a syntactic way that's a little hard to figure out at first. Their moans, wait a minute, that should be a subject of a sentence, but of course it's not. The vales redoubled their moans to the hills. And so we're starting the sestet, and we get another line with a funky 2-syllable ending that has to leap across the line. And they to heaven. And that leap too is unclear syntactically. We have to go back. We're missing a verb, and we have to go back and supply the last verb that we saw. They redoubled those moans to heaven. They, who's they? The vales. So, no, sorry, the hills. So what happened? To put it into paraphrase, the vales redoubled their moans to the hills, the valleys to the hills, and the hills redoubled their moans to heaven. And symmetrically, the 10th line begins with 2 syllables and a full stop period. Then we go on to explain the rest. Well, this is just strange, and I think that strangeness Milton meant us to notice. What do we make out of this? Well, I notice that it's pastoral. It's engaged in the natural world. It's not addressed to God. The first full sentence, all the way down to rocks, is addressed to God. The third sentence, their martyred blood and ashes sow, is addressed to God. It's an imperative. Do this, do that. The middle sentence, the transitional sentence, is pastoral, natural, engaged in the natural world. It's not only that, it's not imperative, it's indicative, it's a narrative. This is what happened. These moans were echoed, and the hills echoed them to heaven. So it's in a different register. It's in the register of nature, of humanity. These are human cries, which we're talking about. These are topographical valleys in the Alps. And so there's a sense in which we're moving with this transitional sentence to a natural, social, material, and political response to this tragedy, away from telling God what to do. Or perhaps not away from that, but perhaps this is where we can understand what it is that Milton wants God to do. So this is a response that leads us then to the third sentence, when we imagine that the God that Milton's addressing now is supposed to sow blood and ashes in Italy, in the papal lands, so that out of those blood and ashes is going to grow more Protestants who have learnt God's way and can fly away, flee the upcoming disaster. What do those people flee? What are they going to flee? The Babylonian woe. Babylon was destroyed by God because it had imprisoned the Israelites. In this case, God is presumably going to destroy the papal states and the triple tyrant, and anybody that's still around. It's going to be an apocalypse of a disaster, plague, who knows, fire, vengeance. It's pretty fierce. Where have we come? Full circle. At first, God was responding to this horrible human evil. At the end, God is the one who inflicts upon humans a further evil unless they shape up. What does Milton want God to do? Vengeance is mine, saith the Lord. And I think he knows that. And I think he knows that the Lord is a God of vengeance. But I think the key lies, and that's certainly where the sonnet ends. Bring that Babylonian woe down on the heads of the triple tyrant and all his compatriots, but save some of our Protestants. Where I think the poem actually develops subtlety, if you can call a poem this fierce, subtle, and complexity, is in the middle, where that God's work, that vengeance that belongs to God, is connected to the natural world, is shown to happen somehow out of the natural world. Their moans, the vales redoubled to the hills, and they to heaven. The echoes that happen in the natural world as we cry and cry aloud and listen to those echoes and hope that something happens out of that, may become agents of further growth sowing. The pastoral continues. Their martyred blood and ashes, these become seeds and manure to support a new crop in those Italian fields, and that those may grow 100-fold. So multiplication of saints after this witnessing this horrible elimination of a whole group of faithful. So somehow I think at the center of this poem, though not at the beginning and not at the end, is a sense that Milton wants God, and here's where I come back to my original question. What does he want him to do? He wants God to come down to earth, to act in the world in ways that we can see materially and that we can engage with. He wants to know that, in fact, God is behind the pastoral echoes, behind the groans. He wants God, I think, to associate God's self with those moans and those echoes and that sowing of ghastly body parts and ashes, um, and with the growth that hopefully will come from that, with the conversion experience, with the evangelizing that I suppose this poem actually refers to. So I see the poem as a fascinating example of Milton distorting a common and well-known sonnet form, poetic form, for, I think, a very complicated process.